Okay, let me try that again.
On the bottom.
Oh yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yes, can see that now.
Okay, I lost my PowerPoint. Just 1 second. My apologies. All right, sorry, is it up now?
Yes, I can see it. Yeah.
Okay, sorry about everybody. I had it up my screen. I accidentally logged out there. So good morning, everybody, and I appreciate your time, and thanks, Nav, for the invitation to come present to your group today. Always exciting to talk about cargo security. It's a bit of a kind of a passion. So just to give you a kind of a quick background on myself and kind of the perspective I'll give on today's lecture. So I'm sure you've had a bunch of different cargo security presentations, but hopefully this might be unique in the sense that I look at it from kind of 4 different lenses. Nav had kind of mentioned prior to joining ISB, I was with the Peel Regional Police for 31 years. I was the detective there, and great organization, but being in policing for 3 decades, you kind of understand the politics of policing and just kind of the resources that are available and some of the challenges. So, and secondly, I guess the second lens is I was fortunate enough during my 12 of my 31 years with the Peel Police, I was the detective in charge of the organized crime unit. And we used to do multiple projects that were mostly all drug related. And I was absolutely shocked that how many of those projects, although they were completely drug importation or some other type of organized crime, always had a nexus to cargo theft. And you're gonna hear me talk about something today called seed money. And I'm a big believer that the cargo theft it's a problem. It's not going away. I think it's going to be here for a long, long time because it's a money-making machine for certain groups. Thirdly, while I was on the policing, I spent a number of years in our robbery unit, and I had a business for 15 years that came about accidentally. As a result of that robbery training, I got asked probably about 10, 12 years ago from an insurance company to come up with a truck hijacking course. And that kind of created my passion for transportation security. And so I always tend to look at things from a compliance perspective, especially when it has to do with safety of employees. And then obviously the last lens is my current job that I'm doing with ISB, and got brought in to kind of create a cargo loss prevention supply chain security program for a bunch of companies. So when we talk about supply chain security, and I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, it's funny, it doesn't matter. Security is very funny. It doesn't matter if you're in logistics, transportation or logistics, or if you're in banking, if you're in retail, security always tends to be reactive as opposed to proactive. And what I mean by that, if you're in the bank, they, until they have a robbery, they don't really worry about, hey, we need robbery training. I used to get calls all the time. I think the same goes with cargo theft, or a lot of companies may be in operation for 20 years and never had a cargo theft, and all of a sudden they get multiple cargo thefts in 1 year, and all of a sudden it becomes the business bottom line, and becomes a problem. Unless you come from culture, and especially if you're fleet security or compliance, or you're in that kind of safety bubble, and you understand the importance of safety and security, a lot of upper management just don't get it. They're bean counters and they're numbers guys. And they have a real hard time kind of putting that ROI on the value of a good security program. So there's always an uphill challenge trying to get funding to implement that. And I always say there's no one fit solution. You know what I mean? There's just not that magic wand. You're going to say, here's a great security program for you, because everybody has different needs. Obviously, the group here today, you're hauling different commodities, so you different risk levels. Sometimes certain companies just want to check the boxes to make sure their insurance premiums covered. So they got basic fencing, basic lighting, maybe a video system that records but isn't monitored, or whatever. It's the bare bones. And what I kind of encourage today, I'm just going to talk about some really cool stuff that's out there, just food for thought that you might want to think about. But try to think where your gaps and where your weaknesses are today, because unfortunately, that's what the bad guys, when the bad guys decide they're going to pick your lot, and they're going to target your premise, they've sensed or they've identified a gap or a weakness, and it's better to be proactive and identify those on your end before you get victimized. So kind of the theme today is think about the best-in-class security practices. And I think about it from preventative. So if you can be preventative up front, hopefully you're never going to have a loss. That's key. And then what am I doing on a daily basis for monitoring? Obviously, if you have high value or high risk shipments, do I have the proper features in place and protocols? And then if I did have a loss, what's my likelihood that I could get that commodity back or that load back so it's not going to affect my insurance? So when we talk about a comprehensive program, it's obviously selfishly to mitigate your losses. It's to make sure you've got your checks and balances in place so you don't get sued. You don't want your reputation out there. Hey, don't use ABC Trucking because they are always losing loads. And lastly, you don't want to affect your insurance premiums because that's probably next to fuel your second biggest expense. So really quickly, I'm just going to kind of touch on risk mitigation. It sounds easy, but it's a pretty complicated process, and there's a lot of moving parts to it. So I always say due diligence, and what is due diligence? Due diligence is just doing the right thing, morally and responsibly, just doing the right thing. And what would a reasonable person do is kind of that due diligence. So obviously, business is business. You got to make money. You got to keep the lights on. So making sure that, hey, if you're using third-party logistics or if you're using subcontractors and vendors, making sure you do your due diligence so you're not going to get messed over with payments. Then we switch into the whole security management part of the side. So what do I have in place that's going to help me mitigate or reduce my losses? So that's where your policies and procedures and having written documentation for compliance and controls, and if you're doing cross-border shipments, making sure, hey, I've done some route analysis. I know where some of the hot spots are. And guess what? If I do have a loss, what's our protocols in place to execute quickly and efficiently so that we can maybe get those records back? And last thing is, am I able to ascertain if I not only, and I know I'm talking cargo theft, but say we had a pilferaging or a loss from point A to point B, do I have that document in place to show what we picked up and what we delivered to figure out where that loss happened? So that's kind of the security management, is the loss control. Obviously, training in the workplace. I know I'm talking about cargo here, but it could be any type of training. I use high value commodities like marijuana. If I was shipping cannabis marijuana, I would want to make sure that my clients, chances are they may never get hijacked, but I think it's only a matter of time until truck hijackings become prevalent with cannabis transporters. I guess just there's such high value commodities. So I would make sure that my drivers had a basic knowledge of what to do if they were ever hijacked. Workplace integrity, I'm going to talk about this a little more, extremely important. Know who's going to be working within your four walls. Make sure they're vetted and make sure that you're not bringing outside problems into your work environment. And the last two, risk management and operational protocols, kind of go hand in hand. So depending on what your commodity that you're transporting, if it's pharmaceuticals, do you need tandem drivers? Do you need proper routing? Are you going to use full security protocols with locks and GPS tracking and check-in points with dispatchers and security operations? And if you had a loss, do you have a track and trace program to kind of help you out and track that stuff? So a lot of moving parts for risk mitigation. What I want to kind of talk about is paint the picture today about the cargo theft problem in Canada. I think you're going to find this fairly unique. You may have heard about it recently. I know last March, it was kind of quiet, and it kind of came to the surface because of an incident in Mississauga with a stolen load of meat where there was a fatality. And I think the media started digging deep and started looking at it. So if you kind of look at the statistics it's an interesting pattern that we're on. So if you go back to 2015, from 2015 to 2018, our cargo theft rates in Canada have almost tripled. We hit a spike in 2018. It was an anomaly. It was kind of a weird year where we had 621 cargo thefts in Canada. 90% of those occurred in Ontario. 341 of those occurred actually in Peel region. And that's pretty astonishing if you kind of look at the same cargo thefts in the US. That same year, there was 591 cargo thefts across all the United States. The second or the biggest location in the United States that year was California with 208. So if you look at the state of California, has 40 million people. They had 208 cargo thefts. Peel region has a population of 1.4 million, and they had 341 cargo thefts, which is absolutely astonishing. So people ask me all the time, and I just show you this because this is, I'm not going to play this video, but this was a global news article that came out as a result of that cargo theft, a load of stolen meat that was taken, and there was a fatal accident. I believe it was McLaughlin and Eglinton, and a truck crashed into an Esso gas station and hit the pumps, and unfortunately an individual died. But because it was a stolen load, the media kind of focused on, hey, is this a bigger problem, and started peeling back the onion and started to expose those numbers. I should have said 2019, things actually came back a little more normal. They were slightly over 300. And I think this year, depending on what happens in the last quarter, things are kind of trending to be comparable to 2019. So people always ask me, why is Canada's numbers kind of, or why Ontario? What is different about Ontario than the US? And this is my personal experience. Working in organized crime for 12 years, it's funny. You get to see the trade craft and how the bad guys think. So I should have told you, my job when I was in Peel was we ran big projects. So we would recruit informants. We take those informants, we make them police agents. So now they work for the police. So you get to understand how people think and what their thoughts are and how they want to make quick money. And cargo theft is easy money. So if you look at the Greater Toronto Area, we have such a unique landscape of organized crime groups that I think is probably the most unique in North America. I did traditional organized crime, so for a lack of a better word, it's Italian mafia, which is the hierarchy. It's the sexy group. It's the ones that are publicized on TV and crime shows, but they are very well structured. They're at the hierarchy, but like any good business, what these groups do, and it's just not cargo theft, they work in conjunction with other criminal organizations to do all kinds of different types of stuff. Could be drugs, importation, etc. But in the GTA, you have traditional organized crime, you have Eastern European organized crime, you have Asian organized crime, you have South Asian organized crime. And what happens is these groups will work in partnership together, and cargo crime is one of the things that they'll work in partnership. So when I say organized, people say, well, what does that mean? Well, organized means that they're set up. They have dedicated theft groups that will go out and they will hit random loads, or they'll hit specific loads. They pay for information. They recruit sources and trucking companies and distribution centers that will provide information maybe once a year or twice a year on certain trailers that have high value commodities, and they will specifically target those. They also have a distribution center or a network set up. It could be people that run restaurants and say, if you have stolen beef, if you have olive oil, cheese, any type of food, I'm always open to buying food or commodities for my business. And then you have other people that say, hey, I'm looking for high value, small items that I can move that aren't traceable. If you ever have anything, let me know. So there's always a distribution system. They have dedicated warehouses where they take the loads. And I always say there's a very, very small window of opportunity to get your stolen stuff back. The next point that I think is kind of big is the public perception. Public perception is that, oh, cargo theft's a property offense and it's a victimless crime, and it's an insurance issue. And it is, but it's not a victimless crime. It's a, when losses go up and insurance companies lose money and they pay out claims, well, guess what? They jack everybody's premiums because they're going to recoup that money. And when I talk about our program was born from the insurance company saying, hey guys, our expense loss ratio is through the roof. What can we do to kind of curb this problem? And I'll talk about that in a little bit. Coming from the police perspective, a lot of people say, well, can't the police do something about it? Hey, the police are doing the best they can. We're very fortunate in the GTA to have Peel Regional Police in York, both have cargo theft units, great investigators, but guess what? They're doing the best they can. And the problem from a policing perspective and with cargo theft, it's a property offense. So if you look at the hierarchy of all the different types of offenses that are happening, The police have a certain budget. Their budget's like anything else. It's getting cut every year because of finances. So they have certain resources that they have to allocate. They have budget restrictions. Every unit, so say there's 40 units within the Peel Police, every unit thinks their investigative priorities the most important. And so there's always this struggle, where are you going to put resources? And because cargo theft's a property offense, it's never going to get that same attention as violent robberies or homicides or gang activity with shootings, because that becomes a personal crime as opposed to a property crime. And then because of that, because you're not getting the financial assistance, like as I said, if you peel back the onion, the root of the problem is organized crime groups, and they're sophisticated. So you need to be creative. You have to have wiretaps and confidential informants and agents and to catch these guys, and that costs money. So it's kind of this vicious circle that we continue to go through. So just really quickly, and I think this is interesting because it kind of paints the picture about the GTA. So I'm not saying traditional organized crime is responsible for all cargo thefts, but I think this is understanding this mindset will help kind of paint the picture. So if you think about in the GTA, the traditional organized crime is at the upper hierarchy of the most strongest groups in the region. And if you look, there's 3 different groups based out of Italy. So you basically have the Costa Nostra, which is your Sicilian mafia, which is the 5 families in New York City, the most popular, the movies have been made about. You have the Camorra based out of Naples that have been involved in port theft and cargo theft out of the ports for 50 years. And then you have the Calabrian mafia, which is the 'Ndrangheta, which is probably the least known but the most powerful. And I say that, I believe it was 2016 or 17. In criminal activities alone, they made about $78 billion. They're called the McDonald's of mafia. They control about 3/4 of the drug activity in Europe. They work in partnership with 2 Mexican cartels. They operate in 30 countries, but what's interesting about that, outside of Calabria, their biggest presence is in the Greater Toronto area. And if you look at cargo thefts going back a couple of years, it was always Toronto and Montreal that kind of had the highest cargo theft ratings. And then that's not by coincidence. That's where the strongest of population of these groups have allocated to, both in Toronto, Hamilton, and in the Montreal regions. So if you kind of look on the right-hand side, this is just kind of a structure. I always say when people say it's organized, well, it is organized. It's built like a business. So your boss would be your president, CEO of your company. Your consigliere would be your general counsel. Your underboss is your vice president. Your capos, or the guys that run their divisions, are directors. They could be directors of sales or operations, and your soldiers are your day-to-day employees that are out doing the sales and trying to find business. And then your associates are the other groups that they're working with. So if you look at different groups, and there's a number of different groups just in that one traditional organized crime group, could be up to 10 different groups. And you could understand if they're all structured that way, and if they're all out doing illegal activity, and cargo theft being one, you can understand how those numbers can climb very significantly. It's a money-making operation. So I talked about seed money, and this is an actual example of something that I was involved in, just to kind of paint the picture. And the group that we were involved in was actively involved in cargo thefts. So they used cargo thefts to fund their drug activity. So I'll give you an example. So they'd steal a load, they'd sell the load for $100,000. That $100,000 of profit will buy you 20 keys of cocaine in the Dominican Republic. So they could buy it for $5,000 a key. That cocaine has a street value of about $1 million in Toronto, based at about, say, $50,000 a key. Now, if I want to bring that from the Dominican into the Toronto airport, I can pay off a corrupt airport employee. The going rate's 20% of the street value of the load. So now that's $200,000. So now my investment's down to $800,000. If I want to keep the books straight, I'm even going to deduct my $100,000 that I invested, which was actually stolen money. So that brings me down to $700,000. And if I decided bi-monthly, I'm going to do a drug shipment. So I'm going to do a cargo theft. I'm going to take the profits. And then every 2 months, I'm going to bring in a shipment of drugs. I can make up towards $4 million, or I can convert that money into $4 million profit. So this is just an example. There's other methods of how they use seed money, but this is just a way, it's an easy way to steal money or steal property that is, you've always heard the term low risk, high reward, and take that money and multiply it and make more money. So to me, it's, in my mind, in my experience, it's just a problem that's not going to go away. I'm not going to play this video, but this was kind of interesting, just down in Texas. And it basically just shows that, they have organized crime groups in Texas along the borders, Hispanic street gangs. And what they're doing is they're stealing, but the same concept. They had warehouses, they had tires, they had home goods, they had shoes, they had apparel. They say it's comparable to like going into a Walmart and just shopping at Christmas. But some of the things they're stealing, whether it be food commodities or pharmaceutical, they're not being refrigerated. So there's that, spoilage or problem, but it's a good video. I just won't play it because I don't have the audio for you. If we talk about cargo theft methods, some of the methods that are used is seal cutting. And what I mean by seal cutting is the bad guys, usually what they'll do is steal a tractor. They'll steal a tractor, they'll come in, they'll go into the back side of your premise, they'll cut a gate. They're either randomly check trailers that might be locked or sealed or ready to go, or maybe it's a reefer that's running, so they know it's some type of refrigeration or frozen goods that they might have a buyer for, or maybe it's a specific target that say, hey, guess what, tractor or trailer 135's got a load of Whirlpool dishwashers in it, and I'm going to go target that. So I'm going to hook up my own tractor, I'm going to steal it, I'm going to drive away. Bad guys know that the majority of trailers aren't GPS. That load's going to go to a warehouse, it's going to be unloaded. The stolen tractor and the stolen trailer are dumped in an industrial area and probably found by the police 4 or 6 hours later in an industrial area. That's kind of how a typical cargo theft happens. Another method is the inside employee theft. That's where organized crime members will recruit individuals that are in a position of authority or have information to manifest information, and they'll just pass that information on. So they're not actively involved in theft, but they're facilitating it through information. And maybe that load is stolen while in transit, or maybe they know it's going to be at a certain location and it's stolen. And the last one is deceptive load theft. And deceptive load theft is quite a big problem, not as significant as trailer theft, but it's a problem in the sense that people are taking over false identities of the trailer or of the trucking company, and changing the bill of lading or shipping records and picking up loads when they're not the proper transportation company. By the way, now if anybody has any questions, I can't see the chat screen, but feel free to stop me and I'll open it up at the very end for questions as well.
There is one thought, but
okay.
I can answer that end of the webinar.
Okay, so I'll just kind of back up. So one of the things when we are building our program is, and ISP, we're involved in all the major insurance companies are our clients. We have a number of trucking companies, and how we got involved was the major insurance companies were getting hit very, very hard for cargo theft claims, and their expense ratios were kind of increasing. And some of the major insurance companies came to us and say, hey, you guys are involved in trucking, you're involved in insurance. Is there a way you can put together some type of program that could assist us? So then we talked to the insurance companies, we got feedback. One of their biggest things was there was a lack of stolen loads that are being recovered. And that was their biggest pain point. And because of that, they end up paying out a claim. Then we talked to a number of different transportation companies, and I totally understand that the margins are very slim in trucking, and people are trying to do more with less, and fuel is going up and this and that. So they're trying to find something that is a best in class that they could use that was going to assist them. And the most important is kind of mitigate those losses so their premiums wouldn't go up as well. And then coming from the police perspective was, I knew what was kind of missing from the police perspective was that ability to provide police with those investigative tools. So how it kind of works now, when a load goes missing, especially if has no tracking device on it, now it's old school policing, working informants, doing stakeouts and trying to get that load back. And so it's there's just a lot of broken gaps, and we thought, okay, what can we do to kind of help fix this? So what I kind of want to do in the next 6 slides here, I just want to show you what's out on the market. We've done a lot of research. I'm not saying that we use all these products, but there's some really cool stuff out there that I just kind of want to share with you for food for thought that might be of interest to you guys. So first thing I'm going to talk about is kind of the preventative methods for driver and business. So obviously, when you talk about employee background screening, I think is key. And I think it's not only key and we're doing a very, very good job because it's kind of mandated by the insurance companies is, hey, let's do the driver qualification. Let's make sure the driver doesn't have an employee record or a criminal record. Let's make sure he's properly qualified. His driver abstract is good. I think where we start to drop the ball a bit, and I'm going to use an example. When I was down at the Texas Cargo Summit last year, they did a study, and it was really interesting. The majority of pilfer genes, so when I showed you that chart earlier, in the US, cargo thefts are going down, but pilfer gene is going up. So pilfer gene is an internal problem most of the times. So what they're seeing is most of the corruption's at the supervisory level. And if you think about it, a lot of the warehouse supervisors or distribution supervisors, they got access to the manifest. They kind of control the personnel schedule, so they can run their own little crews. And what they're seeing is the pilfer gene of kind of a quarter pallet or maybe a half skid pallet, high value commodities were being taken from the pallet, put into personal vehicles, and then those are being driven off site during the course of a lunch break or a certain break. So, and where the breakdown was is the drivers were being checked, but the personnel working inside the distribution center weren't being vetted. So I guess my advice would be, don't stop at the drivers. Make sure that anybody who's touching the supply chain at any touch point needs to be vetted, and just make sure that you're not bringing outside problems. Another thing that I think is very big is the kind of a cargo crime awareness training. 2020 has been a weird year, and I mentioned the cannabis marijuana, in the last year and the concerns about that. So obviously, if it's high value loads like pharmaceutical or cannabis, stuff that could be hijacked, could easily be hijacked, and you can make off with a $5 million load. Your driver should have some type of knowledge as to the do's and the don'ts if I ever got hijacked. Who would ever thought that a load of Lysol wipes or disinfectants or toilet paper could be in high demand as well, right? So if you have high risk, high value loads, just ensure that, hey, guess what? There's the possibility, or electronics, possibility that these could get stolen. And it's all about due diligence. You don't want to have something happen to your driver, or the driver is assaulted or injured or killed, and all of a sudden now your compliance comes under a microscope saying, well, guess what? What did you provide that driver with as far as knowledge as to how to deal with an incident like that? So the link I was going to kind of show you there is, if you remember last year, there was a $7 million load of cell phones that was stolen from Brampton, and it was a group of, I believe there's 9 different people involved in it. One of the places they went, they stole a load, and they used the security guard's access card to open the gate. And there was some non-compliance, and there was a gun stuck to the security guard. So once again, you would never think that would happen, but kind of having the bare bones basic knowledge of do's and don'ts. Another thing is yard assessments and site security. Obviously, these are something that if you're at a higher level and you have TAPA standards, those are something, you have that accreditation. But even sometimes when you're doing your CTPAT, or you're doing your PIP compliance for cross-border crossing, customs requires it. So it's a kind of a reflection on what are we doing good and what could we improve on. I know a lot of insurance companies will either come out and do a site assessment on you, or they might ask you guys to do a self-assessment. And just in checks and balances, what do you have in place for perimeter security, video surveillance, vetting employees, and this and that. So having just that report card that you can change annually is probably a good practice to have, and it just keeps you updated. And once a year, you can kind of revisit what are we doing? Are are we still hitting the mark on this? Could we improve on that? So I think site assessments is something good. Facility and yard security. It's funny, you look back, and I don't know if it's a younger generation or maybe it's the enhancement of technology, but I think the dates of you know, the security guards, and we had a security company for a number of years, so I kind of know all about the guards, but you get what you pay for. And I think there's other technologies out there that are more beneficial and more useful than security guards. There's interactive remote video monitoring. There's some really cool products that if you, and I've always preached this from an underwriting perspective, if a bad guy jumps a fence at 2 o'clock in the morning and you have infrared cameras and motion detection and you have live monitoring, and you can pick that bad guy up before he gets to your trailer or your truck, and you could cut that video in a snippet, notify the police and send that video to police in real time. From a police perspective, if they say a picture's worth 1,000 words, that's like hitting a home run. So there's some really cool technology out there that I think can be very proactive in yard security. The next two things is I'm going to kind of blend the driver vehicle inspection reports. I know we're going to the ELDs in June, so I think what you're going to see, because it's going to be such a competitive market, the ELDs are obviously going to have a tracking component, and I think a lot of them will have a built-in vehicle inspection report, which is some probably doing manually, that will be converted digitally. Some of these, and there's a number of different products out there, but there's some ones that are done on the phone that the driver uses. Very cool, actually. They use it's an app, they use the driver's phone. It allows them to take pictures. It's certain templates and fields they just check off with their finger. They can sign their signature on their phone. And kind of the cool thing, they can take a picture, and that PDF is actually, or that app, it converts the form to a PDF and it's sent to the fleet manager. So it's instant documentation. The same concept is used for proof of delivery. And it's funny because we do a lot of cargo damage or cargo theft investigations for a big insurance company in the US. And I've probably had 8 this year so far with cargo damage. And a proof of delivery app would have kind of stopped it right at day one. It was he said, she said type deal. And a lot of it was the load sealed or was it not sealed? And so what the proof of delivery is it uses the driver's phone. It allows the driver to take a picture of maybe the seal number, if it's a refrigeration unit, the temperature. It allows to monitor the driver's course from start to finish, so you know the times. And it's also very useful in the sense that I mentioned about pilferage. A lot of times what's happening in the US is trailers are being hit. The full trailer is not being stolen, but it's being hit en route. And the pilferaging, you know, the proof of delivery app can kind of help ascertain where that pilferaging took place. Another thing to look at is supply chain security management. Once again, this is just something if you're a big company and you're sometimes, we had an incident where some people were using third-party logistics. They had multiple different platforms, GPS systems. They're escalating the different methods. They didn't really have any processes in place for, you know, what third-party contractors were supposed to adhere to. So sometimes it's a third party coming in, going through what you have in place and saying, okay, here's where your gaps, here's what you need. You need to consolidate everything into one. And everybody's got to be working and marching to the same beat as opposed to marching on 40 different steps, right? So sometimes that's a necessary requirement. Intelligence and analytics. This is something we don't do very well in Canada. And the reason I say this, people ask me, well, in Canada, I think because our cargo theft is so centralized to the Greater Toronto area, there's not a huge need to share a bunch of intelligence, where if you look in the states have 7 hotbeds. So they have Los Angeles, Dallas, Miami, Atlanta, Memphis, New Jersey, Chicago, and then Toronto being the 8th. So in the US, there's cargo theft groups. They do analysis, they do statisticals. You have Sensitech, CargoNet. They have, you know, you have cargo theft task force that are made up of local, state, and federal police agencies, and they target cargo theft in their areas. So because there's 7 different groups working, there's the sharing of intelligence. And that's something that we're working with, a group actually just started. It's a global e-commerce person that has a lot of transportation people in Canada. And we just had our first meeting. And I think that's what we're driving to see if we can create an intelligence-based, and to me, intelligence is information and information is power. So if you knew as a safety person for logistics or a loss prevention person, hey, here's a real high risk route or high risk area, you're going to do the safer route as opposed to going through a red zone. So it's something that I think will change in the future. GPS tracking. I'm a huge component of GPS tracking. I'm going to tell you a very, very quick story. When I was in policing, I had an individual that we worked with that was entrenched in cargo theft. And it was funny, when I left, I said, I'm going to the private sector. I'm going to be involved in cargo security. If I was to deputize you for the day, how would you end cargo theft? And this is a person for years that was involved in cargo theft. Started laughing. He took a piece of paper. He wrote down one thing on the piece of paper, and he said, it said, dude, GPS every trailer, because all the bad guys know the trailers aren't GPSed. And that's coming from a bad guy who was involved in this type of things. And it just does make sense. And I understand why it's not done, but if you, if trailers were GPSed and properly tracked, cargo theft there would be a reduction in cargo theft that would be tenfold. And I understand it from a logistics and business point. If you have 300 tractors, you're probably going to have 500 trailers. It becomes a cost factor. But I think one of the things you look at is there's different factors in GPS. There's different components. You have satellite that can go on the trailer, maintenance free. It's battery lasts for 7 years, and you're doing a 10-minute ping. You can get down and you can hardwire GPS into the tail lights that they can be recharged while the tractor is moving, or you can use embedded cargo if you have high risk value loads and you embed it into the pallet itself. So there's different options. Obviously, depending on what type of commodity, if it's cargo, it could be or pharma has different needs for temperature and humidity, and food, obviously the same thing. But there's a lot of really cool products out there. I think that there's two I just want to know. Obviously, the vehicle immobilizer. So there's aftermarket GPS devices that could be installed in the tractor itself. So you can do the remote fuel shutdown if the tractor got stolen. You can do the ignition start that it won't start. There's some really great ones for the tractor. There's one that I'll tell you about. It's a trailer immobilization kit, and it works with a GPS, but it's an app. So your driver has an app. And basically, there's a device that's hooked up to the air brakes. And when the driver gets out, the driver punches in a code, and the dispatch can also override that code as well. So the driver can punch in a code, go into the truck stop, and it puts on the air brake so that trailer cannot be moved. And literally, when I say it can't be moved, it's dragging the trailer. And it's a total game changer. It's, if somebody steals a tractor and comes and tries to hook up a trailer and that device is activated, it's not going to move. So those are just some really neat things that are, and then obviously there's locking devices with GPS capabilities and that are encrypted. So I guess my last point is I think, actually I'll save this for the cameras. Okay, so I'm going to kind of move on. Another really cool product out there is a cargo intruder DNA spray system. This could be a game changer. I think if people that manufacture it, I think the price point's a little high right now because it's more designed for high value loads. A little backstop story on this. When I was in my robbery business, there was 3 companies in the UK that had a similar product, and it was designed for robbery and break and enters. And it reduced crime in the United Kingdom by 80%, and it was used by 146 police agencies in the United Kingdom. So one company came out with a product about 1.5 years ago. It was supposed to be launched in Europe. And what it is, it's a portable cargo intruder DNA spray system. So it goes inside the trailer, it's portable, goes inside the cargo doors, it's activated with a key fob. And what happens is when the bad guys open it, that system can be, it's synthetic DNA spray. So it's like a water-based spray, and it can be designed for the trucking company. That code can be designed for an individual trailer if they're high value loads. So what it does is when the doors are breached, the mist sprays on the bad guy, it gets on his skin, it gets on his clothing, it obviously sprays on the shrink wrap on the goods. and it'll stay on the skin for up to 6 months, up to clothing for 2 years. And what happens is that when the police are provided with an ultraviolet blue light, they will go in and they will spray, and police investigators can swab the collected sample and match it to the control sample, and it will positively link bad guys and stolen property to a crime scene. So it's an absolute game changer. But right now I think the price is starting to drop, but right now it's more used for high value loads. But if they could bring that price point down where you could put one of these in every trailer, and the thing is, they don't hide it. They put big placards on the back of the trailer. This is protected by DNA spray. So great system, psychological warfare on the bad guy. Next thing I just want to touch base on really quickly is the trailer security cameras. We're currently involved right now with a 5G cargo security initiative that we get asked to participate in. And it's pretty cool. I think 5G is going to be, I think the advancements in 5G and the stuff you can do, so not only GPS data, but pictures, you can install 5G security wireless devices. So picture something like a trail camera. And what happens now is it records to an SD card, or maybe it sends a photo. What's going to happen in the future over 5G, you'll be able to stream video right from a trailer security camera. And so once again, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and this is my police hat coming on. But if I could see live footage of the bad guys, it's a game changer. But right now, I think the networks just don't allow for that bandwidth of volume to be streamed. So very excited about that. But the trailer security cameras, once again, night vision, motion detection for up to 60 feet. So it covers the entire length of a 53-foot trailer, and it can capture what's going on inside the trailer. Quickly, this is kind of a neat thing, trailer security vault. So if you travel with mixed loads, these were originally designed for moving and storage, but what they found from a pilfering perspective, if I break into a trailer and I got different loads for different customers, what they were using was these trailer vaults that could be locked individually, GPSed individually, and 7 would fit on a 53-foot trailer. So once again, just another deterrent. If you ever got hit, somebody has to go through 6 of these to get to a high value load. It's not, the squeeze isn't worth the juice, right? So cargo security escorts, obviously in Canada, those are unarmed. A lot of big couriers will do it for certain high volume commodities. In the US, armed. Reason I talk about this is depending on the insurance policy, I know certain insurance companies will say if the load's over a certain value, a cargo escort has to be implemented. The next thing I want to kind of talk about, I'm not sure if anybody on the call is involved in intermodal shipments with sea containers, but very interesting with that. The whole intermodal market's extremely interesting. Obviously, ports are a hotbed of organized crime. If you look in Canada, Vancouver, Montreal, even in the States, in New Jersey and New York and Baltimore and other places like that. But there's a number of different devices. So you can put tracking devices on cargo security, but there's one product that's really, I was pretty impressed with it. It's called iSeal. And what happens, it's a breach detection device. And what that does is it goes inside it doesn't look like much. It looks kind of cheap actually, but it's a pretty effective tool. Goes inside the doors. And what happens right now with a container is they have the standardized seal. Those seals can be compromised. If you ever Google it or Google it, you'll see some, they use a pillowcase and they can pull off the seal. But what this does, it monitors the opening of the left and right door. It monitors temperature, light, and humidity. So it gives you a forensic report card of what's going on within that container. So if the container door was ever breached, it's going to give you a reading, the exact time. It works off both cellular and satellite. So it'll kick in when it hits the shore, or if it's on rail, or if it's by truck. And it works in conjunction with a GPS tracking device. So it's a pretty robust system. Great if you have high value commodities or temperature sensitive commodities like tobacco. Apparently in the tobacco industry, if the temperature fluctuates 7 degrees, the whole shipment could be destroyed, right? So very interested if you're involved in intermodal. Just a couple more slides and then I'll get into some, I'll switch gears. driver safety and security, it's funny. I know we talk about the LED tracks the track or the tractor, and I'm sure when the LEDs come out, they're going to be multifunctional, and some might even have a panic button for a driver. But I get asked all the time. I've got asked from female drivers, is there anything out there that can help us as a personal protection device? And it's funny, I'm working with a global courier company right now that unfortunately had a driver shot in the summer, and now it's hurry up offense to put something in place. But what could be used from the driver? And it could be multiple use. So if a driver went into a truck stop and they came out and their tractor was missing and trailer, it's a device that you activate SOS alert. So it's basically like a call for 911. It's a call for assistance. But it could be used from the truck hijacking, could be used for a medical incident where if, if there was an accident or something, they could call for assistance in conjunction with 911. And it's a personal safety device. So I think there's going to be, and what's good from it from a logistics point of view, it's another point of GPS tracking. So if that driver's carrying a portable handheld GPS device, you're also tracking your load. So if you look at Mexico, what's going on in Mexico with cargo truck hijackings, the cab, the truck is tied for GPS, the trailer is GPS, the load is GPS, the driver is GPS. They have 4 points of GPS contact. So if somebody tries to jam the truck, there's multiple points of GPS. So something to consider. Another thing that we get asked, and this was feedback from the insurance companies, was, guess what? To monitor, so people say, well, I'm going to use GPS, but now GPS becomes cumbersome in the sense that it's only good if somebody's monitoring it. And how do we go about dedicating and monitoring those alerts? And a lot of times, trucking companies are using monitoring not only probably more for non-compliance than cargo security. I'll give you an example. And I don't imagine we have any manufacturers here, but if I was a distributor or a manufacturer and I had a third-party logistics company and you're moving $5 million load of electronics, I want to make sure you're going from point A to point B and you're not stopping in a red zone. So monitoring those loads can become cumbersome, but it's necessary. So, and having the ability to look at multiple alerts, if it's temperature, if it's doors, if it's cargo, and reacting to those alerts in real time. So sometimes people just don't have the bandwidth to do that inside. Another thing that we got asked about was the whistleblower. And it's funny, I look, and maybe this is from policing because I had a lot of experience with, I used to run Crime Stoppers at one time and years ago, and how effective it was. And I'm always thought that if you give people a vehicle and an avenue to call anonymously, they will. And 99% of your employees are good people, but there's always that one bad apple. So setting up some type of cargo theft tip line that would allow people to report information on cargo security or cargo theft or cargo crime is something that I think is very beneficial, and it kind of helps you control your own environment. Last slide here, and then I'll move on to a survey result. Incident management. If you look today, and depending on the size of your operation, usually what you're going to do is you're going to have that fleet management person is going to be your contact for GPS alerts. And some of the feedback we got when we were looking at our program was, okay, a load goes missing in the west end of Mississauga, 7 minutes later it's in Milton, then next thing you know, I got a ping and it's a Guelph line on the 401. Well, is that Halton? Is that OPP? Is that going to be Guelph Police? Is that Hamilton Wentworth? Who do I call? And remember I said time is of the essence. You have such a small window of opportunity to get that load back. So a lot of the feedback was saying, hey, we want to track, but we don't have the bandwidth to do this incident management stuff. So that's something to consider depending on how much resources you have. Obviously, if you have your own control center, it's not really a problem. But if you're a smaller organization, you want to do the best, but you just don't have the bandwidth to do all that. And the next one is incident response. And this came out of more from a US thought process. And once again, it came from the insurance companies, and you hear from the trucking companies all the time. Todd, we had a loss in Brampton. We had 2 losses this month in Brampton. We called the police and the police couldn't respond. And it's not that they can't respond, it's just that they're so busy. So one of the things that is incorporated in one of the services that can be offered, and it's offered in the US, is the ability to deploy an incident response team. And that incident response team, they're not going to engage the bad guys. They're a professional witness, eyes and ears. And all they're going to do is they're going to take that GPS data and they're going to monitor it. And when that load goes into that warehouse and that truck's unloaded, when the police show up an hour later, an hour and a half later, maybe they're going to pass that data onto the police. And what that data does, it allows the police to articulate, say, guess what, the load left here, it's gone there, it hasn't moved. And guess what, we're going to be able to articulate and write a search warrant and try to get into that warehouse, because I know it's there, you know it's there, but we have to be able to articulate to a judge that it's there. And the incident response team just allows that continuity that, guess what, I've been here and that trailer hasn't left the warehouse. So it's a plain clothes cargo theft investigators, but they're not engaging, they're just assisting with the load recovery. And the last thing is the cargo theft investigations. A lot of times, once again, the insurance companies are, as part of the claims, they're going to do their own full-blown cargo theft investigation in parallel with the police, just to make sure that nothing was missed. So I know I got 6 minutes here. I wanted to kind of finish on a kind of more of a positive note. So back in January, we did this was kind of a small scale survey, and it was just the numbers aren't, and some of the categories aren't 100% because obviously some were clients, so they're a little more proactive. But I just kind of wanted to throw some interesting statistics by you here. So 70% of the survey group had some type of loss, whether a tractor or a trailer. When we asked about video surveillance, 54% were using video that wasn't monitored, and 38 were using some type of video that was monitored 24/7. So I guess for the 54%, what I just say is, hey, having video is better than not having any video. The only concern about and maybe sometimes you can get the video where you get the alert, a text message, and like my home camera system, I get a notification, I can see what's going on. But unfortunately, a lot of times what happens is a theft happens at 2 o'clock Saturday morning. The owner comes on Monday morning and realizes my fence is being cut and I'm missing 2 trailers. And now we go back and we look at the video. So great to have the video surveillance, but the chances of getting that load back is nil. So that's something that I think, keep an open mind to it. We did a survey, how many GPS devices are you using for your tractor? And it was 95%, which makes sense. That's going to jump to 100% come ELD when it's mandated. And I think this is a lot of companies are probably crossing to the US where it's already in effect. So that's good. This 49% is a little deceiving. I think some of the companies that we engaged were actively involved in trailer monitoring. I don't have the exact statistic, but I've heard from GPS partners that the number ranges from 12 to 15% of all trailers are GPS, which, so I think this number's inflated. Embedded cargo, no one was using it. About 8% were using panic buttons. The screening of personnel, so doing employee screening, like criminal record checks, 100% for drivers, which is fantastic. That's almost a mandate though from your insurance companies. Where I think we could do better in the survey is the next two. 51% were screening warehouse employees and 54% were only doing admin staff. What I would say is if you're working in a place that property or commodities are being stored or being loaded, vet everybody in your organization. And I think that's just a due diligence, and it's just good practice. And then the last slide here is 73% are doing an annual risk assessment, which is great. 46% of it, and a lot of people might not be using third-party logistics, but they have some type of protocols in place as part of their contract for third-party logistics. And then the last two is, yes, they have a process in place to escalate to the police. And the last one is they have a dedicated person that will manage the GPS alert. So just kind of food for thought. So, and I got, that's it for me now. I got 5 minutes and I just wondering if I can.
Yes, Todd, we have a couple of questions in your chat box. If you can please have a quick look and then reply to that.
Okay, let me just, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna, let me just go up to my chat here. Okay, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm just gonna stop sharing and then I'll see, okay, I can see the chat box here. Okay, so under the facility and air security, it says necessary for security, compliance, and liability. Are you talking about guard or in general 24-hour security, remote or on site? Um, that's a really good question. I would say it all comes back to, once again, all due diligence. Any type of security is better than no security. So I would say I would kind of rate them in tiers. Obviously, if you have fencing and lighting, that's one thing. If you have video surveillance, that's great. If you're monitoring that video surveillance 24/7, that kind of negates the need for a live guard. A live guard is great. If you're using live guards, I just think that you need to hold them accountable, right? And terrible to say, but you get what you pay for, right? I think if you're using, a lot of times in my practice, I see guards being used for access, gate access control. That same 24/7 interactive remote videoing, it's set up to monitor access control for trucks and trailers leaving with digital footage as well as an electronic log. So it just becomes what is a cost factor. So maybe, you know, I know with security guards, because we were in the security guard business for a number of years and it's not cheap, but I just think having, if you're going to have something, I guess it depends on your operations, if it's required to be 24/7, but not to dance around your question, but I think it's a tiered response, right? So the more you have, probably if something did happen, you're going to look more favorable in the eyes of the insurance. Have you seen any trends in relation to Canadian carriers using CTPAT program logo that may actually not be registered with CTPAT? That's a great question. I haven't seen any. What I do like about the CTPAT program is I always say it's like Nexus for trucking, right? So it makes you, obviously the process to be, the application process is pretty in depth. But I also think it makes you reflect internally what you have in place and where your weaknesses are. That's a great question. I will have to keep my ears open to that. I haven't seen any people using it, but I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't be surprised if people got their hands on one of the logos that they're using it. I'm sure there has to be some precautions or some safeguards at the border built into that could be easily detected though. I could be wrong, but I'll have to ask my CBSA colleague about that's in commercial trucking. So have you seen any trends in relation to Canadian carriers? Oh yeah, sorry, that was the same one. FYI, the webinar link for the recording version doesn't seem to work. Can you resend? Okay. Yeah, those are really great questions. And I kind of go back to the first one about security. I just think it becomes a cost factor. All these things are great to have in a perfect world, but it becomes what's in the budget. So if security guards is cheaper or interactive remote videoing is cheaper, just looking to see if you have something in place. And maybe it is. Maybe it's recording to a DVR with notifications to a fleet manager or to the general manager if there's an alert. That's a perfect option. So you don't have to be super expensive. I guess kind of what my goal is when I was talking about NAV was hey, I spent a lot of time researching a lot of stuff in the world. So if it can help you guys, there's a lot of cool stuff out there. And by all means, feel free to send me stuff if there's something I can help you out with, or have a lot of different connections. I maybe don't have it myself, but I could connect you with the right people that could help you out. So.
Thank you, Todd. It was great information. And unfortunately, we are already completed our time.
Okay.
11. And I know there is tons of more information to share. And you can talk another few hours on this with all this information. Yeah, but we really want to appreciate your time, Todd, today. And
okay.
A great thank you to all our attendees who really spare their time and join us every Thursday. And thank you, everyone.
Okay, thanks very much, Nav, and thanks for everybody. And Nav has my contact information if anybody.
Sure.
Thanks very much.
The recording of this webinar will be available on the site. So if you need the recording in your email box, I can send you in your email as well. And my phone number is 647-818-2121. If you have any questions, please don't feel hesitate to call me anytime. Thank you again.
Okay, thank you, Nav. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Todd. Yeah.
Bye.